Hi guys, welcome to my video. In this video, I will answer top 10 PLC queries which were posted on my channel. I know you have posted many comments below the videos, but I couldn't answer all of them. But I hope this video will cover all your queries related to PLC. So let's see what are the top 10 PLC queries on this channel. Alright, the first question is, I'm a beginner. How do I start learning PLC? Is there any free software available? The answer is yes, but don't worry, everybody is a beginner in their life. And I would suggest two cases. Let's say case one, if you can afford a PLC. Because if you want to learn PLC, you should have a PLC with you. So if you can afford a PLC, I would recommend you to buy Delta 12 SC PLC. This is a basic module which you can start learning. Now why I recommend this PLC? Because it has a free software. And if you have a free software, you can just install it and start practicing it. But many PLC manufacturers sell their softwares. So if you can't afford a lot of money to spend on this PLC learning, you can just buy Delta 12 SC PLC. In other case, if you can manage to spend some money, invest your money in the learning, I would recommend you to try Siemens S7-1200. This is a basic module and you need a software TR portal, and with these two together you can have a really good PLC learning. Now the question is, where do you learn the PLC? Now in my YouTube channel Learn PLC in Hindi, I have almost about 80 video tutorials to teach PLC starting from scratch. So if you have a PLC, you can follow through these lessons and you can learn the PLC. And if you're having a Siemens PLC, in that case I have my courses specially made for S7-1200 and also the HMI. And the exciting thing is, recently I also have a course which explains how to link the Siemens PLC with Ignition SCADA. Alright, now coming to the people who can't afford a PLC. Because many students also, when I was studying my PLC, I can't afford it. So in that case, I recommend you to download a software, ISP Soft. It's also from Delta Technology. In this software, you can simulate the logic. So you can also practice the PLC. And you can follow these 80 video tutorials from my YouTube channel and use the simulator, and you can just start your learning. I have enough examples and enough exercise for you to practice the PLC. So these are the two scenarios and you can right away start your PLC learning. And if you have any doubt, you can always comment on the video and I will try my best to answer your queries. Alright, query number 2. Is there any free SCADA software available to link it with the PLC? Now generally SCADA softwares are not free, but don't worry, I would give you two recommendations. My first recommendation is use Ignition SCADA. It's not completely free, but they have 2 hours trial version, which is enough for learning. If you're just learning the SCADA software, use Ignition SCADA. Now my second recommendation is, if you're good with programming, if you're not beginner, you know a little bit of programming, then I would recommend you Node-RED. I'm personally using Node-RED to make visual dashboards. And the benefit of Node-RED over Ignition SCADA is you have free plugins. To have OPC plugin, you have MQTT plugins, you have MySQL plugins available for free to link your external softwares or technologies using Node-RED. But the advantage of Ignition over Node-RED is, in Ignition you don't have to do much of programming. They have already these modules set up, so limited programming knowledge is required. But if you go to Node-RED, you need a bit more of programming knowledge because you have to code everything in the Node-RED. You have to make a visual dashboard like by some programming codes. So my two recommendation is Ignition or Node-RED. If you can start with Ignitions once you are good with programming, and then you can proceed to Node-RED. That would be the best recommendation. Query number 3. Can I link Ignition SCADA with a PLC simulator? Now this is a bit tricky. Generally, Ignition SCADA requires a hardware PLC for communication because it needs an Ethernet port for communication. But don't worry, I have a video where I have explained how you can use PLC Sim and communicate with your Ignition SCADA even if you don't have a PLC. This is possible using a third-party software, and this third-party software will make a virtual Ethernet adapter which will communicate with Ignition SCADA, and this adapter will also communicate with PLC Sim. So this way you can communicate your Ignition SCADA with your PLC Sim software. So your solution is here. You can practice your PLC logics with SCADA screens via this third-party software. Check out this video. Query number 4. Which is the best book to learn PLC? Now honestly, I've never used any book to learn PLC. Always I open up the manuals of a specific PLC manufacturer to understand and know how this PLC works, because most of the PLC has different way to program it. So the best way is check out the manual. So what you can do is you can check out the manual of Siemens PLC. They have user manuals free to download in their website. So read these manuals and get yourself informed with how this PLC works. This is the best way you can learn PLC. Of course, there are many books on the market, but this will just give you an overview of the PLC, its parts, how does it work, what is the scan time, what is inputs, what are outputs. But if you know the basics, open the manuals, that's the best thing. Query number 5, how can I become a good PLC programmer? Now this is a query asked by most of the students in my comment section. Now I would say that you need to do practice. Practice makes the man perfect, or the master in that, to be very precise. Now the question is, suppose if I'm a student, I have a PLC software, I somehow arrange to have a PLC. Would that be enough to be a good programmer? I would say no, because when you have a PLC, if you have a manuals, of course you practice the commands and you're learning from it, but there's something which is missing. You need hardware, you need some control stations to program it, to test your logics, to get challenging exercises. And these control stations are too expensive for the personal learning. So one thing is you can go to some good institute, get the training, and if they have these equipments, use them and make some exercises on them, and you can do it. Second case, if you don't have the time for your training and you still want to be better because you're involved in other jobs and you want to move to PLC programming jobs, so in that case, I would recommend you a software which is called Factory.io. And Factory.io is an amazing software which gives you a platform to use the sensors, actuators, and use them with your PLC logics. So you have various control stations, like you have liquid level control, you have warehouse, you have pick and place robots. So you can create your own exercises. You can challenge yourself. How should I make the box from one place to another place? How do I store it in the warehouse? So all these things you can practice in the Factory.io. And this is one of my best recommendations for somebody who wants to be a good PLC programmer, because you have a lot of things to do in that. You have so many new sensors coming up. Now you also have an RFID. So you know how to store the box with a specific RFID in a specific shelf in the warehouse. So everything is possible in this software Factory.io. So if you want to be a good programmer, you need to have something, either have a hardware facility to practice the PLC, or if you can't afford that, or if you don't have the time, use the Factory.io software. And you can find the link of the software below this in the description, how to purchase it and how much it costs, but I would highly recommend you to have that. Query number 6. What are the PLC related interview questions? Now this question has been asked by many students, also by personally pinging me in the Facebook, because they're going for the interview and they want to know what they can learn. So it's a really personal choice when it comes to what kind of questions interviewer will be asking, because it depends who's taking your interview. If he's a programmer, he would have a different set of questions. If he's a manager, or if he's from the production department or from the R&D department, there are a different set of questions. So it always depends who's taking your interview. You have to do a bit of research in that. But if I have to take a PLC interview, which I did already in my past, let me tell you what are the questions which I will personally ask to understand the knowledge of automation or PLC a person has when he's applying for a PLC programming jobs. So I have listed several questions, so I will just read it out. My first question would be, what is your favorite PLC programming language and why? Now this is very important because there are many different PLC programming language. The most commonly are SCL, ladder logic, FPD, graph, and structured text. Now why I ask this question, because for example, in different countries, there's a different cultural thing to program something in. For example, let's say in India, mostly people program in ladder logics. They're used to that, also many different Asian countries. But here in Germany, people program using SCL or FPD. And most of the professors teach FPD in the university, and that's how they are learning it. And they never use ladder logic. So based on which programming language you know would be beneficial for interviewer to absorb you more quickly. Because if somebody is expert in ladder logic and he never programmed in SCL, and the whole company programmed in SCL with all the customers, it's a little bit not so comfortable to change the language immediately, you know. So my suggestion would be learn all the languages, at least know how to work with these, and make one of your language as your favorite, and then you have to explain why you like it. So be ready to be this question to be asked. My second question would be, how would you connect a PLC with IO-Link sensor technology? Now you know that IO-Link is coming aggressively in the market to capture Industry 4.0 concepts. So you should know how to connect a PLC with IO-Link sensor or actuator technology, because most of the sensors are now being replaced by IO-Link. So if you know how to make the communication, it's a thumbs up in your profile. Question number 3. What is an OPC server? Why do I need it? And how to link a PLC with OPC server. Now many PLCs comes with built-in OPC server, and some PLC has to connect to the OPC server. So there's a bridge between PLC and OPC server. So you should be ready to answer this question as well. And my next question is, what is a scan time in a PLC? What is a dog timer in a PLC? So you should know these definitions before you go for the interview. Question number 5, how can one establish PLC to PLC communications? Now, if we have two PLCs, how they can talk to each other? Would you use OPC, or would you use Modbus, or would you use direct Profinet connections? You should be able to answer these questions as well. Another question I would like to ask, some basic concepts of sink and source, about sensor wirings, and difference between function block or functions in Siemens softwares. What is a safety PLC? Why do we need it, for example? And some other question which you should be ready about is, what is MES, what is ERP, or what is cloud, and why do we need this in a PLC control system? What else I would like to ask is, what is MQTT, and how we can link MQTT with the PLC, for example. And last question I would like to ask is, how to connect a PLC to the cloud. Now we know that we have various cloud services like Amazon, like Microsoft Azure or IBM, and how to send the data from my PLC to the cloud. What should be the link between these two? Can I send it directly, or is there any third-party software, or should I use Raspberry Pi? How do I do that? So if you're ready to answer these questions, I would say that you can go for the PLC interview, because if you know these answers, you might give an impact, or if you learned these before, that you are aware with the Industry 4.0 concept. Even if the interviewer don't ask you these questions, you can somehow include these information in your answers by telling about what you love about technology. So this will be a win-win situation. Query number 7. Most of the students ask me, which programming language should I learn if they're starting learning PLC? Now I would say, if you're starting learning PLC, start with the most comfortable language you find. For example, in your school, if we have learned a lot about C or C++, so you can start learning SCL in the PLC in the beginning. If you haven't learned any programming language, let's say you are novice in programming, then I would say start with FBD or ladder logic. But I would say learn all of them. If you want to compete with this competitive world in the job market, you should know all programming languages, at least 3 of them. So top 3 which I would recommend is SCL, FBD, and Graph. Learn 3 languages, these 3 languages which will really help you to program your controller in a more convenient way. Because every programming language has its importance. For example, if I talk about Graph, if you want to make a sequential logic, you can use Graph, because Graph has a predefined sequencer in that. And you can control the sequencer very easily. So if your application demands some sequence steps, you can use Graph in that. Now, if your application has a lot of mathematical calculations, data handling, in that case, I would recommend you to use SCL, because that is more like C++, and you can do very easily data handling using functions, moving the information from there to there, reading the information using SCL quite easily. And if your application is really basic, in which you just have some interlocks, some timers and counters, in this case, I would recommend you to use ladder logic or FBD, because that is the most convenient and a symbolic way to represent your logic. So it really depends how good you are, what kind of application do you have. So that's why my recommendation is learn all of them. This will really help you to have confidence in any application you want to program. Query number 8. Do I give physical classes or classroom training on PLC? Well, unfortunately not. Presently, I'm living in Germany. I did this physical classroom training for 5 years when I was in India. So since October 2015, I moved to Germany and I started teaching online. So most of my courses, at least all of my courses, has online videos which are pre-recorded, and you can watch these videos and you can practice along with these videos. So in this case, as I said before, I recommend you should have a PLC and you have my videos. So you watch the videos, perform your exercise, and I believe self-learning is the best learning for some people, for at least me, because I have learned most of the things by myself. I've never been to a PLC training center for my PLC knowledge. I always learn by myself because I know myself what kind of teaching I need. Do I need an instructor, or do I need my own time, or do I need my time with my controllers and my softwares? And at what time I want to learn. Some people like to learn at night, some people love to learn in the morning. So I believe if you do self-learning, that's the best way, but I don't provide physical classroom training in Code and Compile. But as a part of my job, I do give physical training to the companies. So if you're lucky, maybe one day you will visit Germany and you will attend my PLC classes if you want. Query number 9. Why I receive communication error when I actuate output in ISP software. Now this is the most common query many people ask me in the Facebook group, in my Facebook Messenger, by emailing. Okay, I need to tell you one thing. In every PLC software, it is not recommended to actuate the inputs directly. For example, you are trying to make a logic. Let's say in ISP software, you have input X0 and you have output Y0. And when you actuate X0, it will give you a communication error because X0 is a physical input. Now this physical input should be turned on by a sensor or by a switch. So turning it on using the software is not recommended because this is what manufacturer decides in their software, that this is not recommended. But if you really want to actuate this input using the software which you were trying and getting the error, you have to enable this forcing. Now in the ISP software, you see this icon. This icon, we have to enable it. Once we enable it, now you will see a confirmation. Now we are able to actuate this input using the software by right-clicking and turning it on. So this is one way if you really want to turn it on. Otherwise, if you're just practicing your PLC programming lessons and you want to use an input, I recommend you to use memory bit, for example, M0 in ISP Soft. So when you use memory bit, you can actuate it from the software itself directly. But if it is X0, this will only be actuated from outside unless you enable the forcing. Yeah. This is a similar case in TIA Portal. We have something called forcing the inputs and forcing the outputs. So these are not recommended to actuate using the software. You need external inputs to turn on the inputs. So that's why you are receiving an error. So the solution is either actuate the forcing or use a memory bit to practice your PLC logic. That's it. Query number 10. I'm from mechanical engineering background. Should I learn programming? Is it beneficial for my career? Many people ask me this question. I would say yes, go for programming, because in today's world, there's so many things which are being programmed. People are embedding internet into every device. So if you're learning programming, you will also understand the new technology way better. This can also be a hobby to learn programming, or you can also use it in your career. Now let me give you my example. I started my career in mechatronics from 2004. When I studied mechanical subjects for 2 years. It was a diploma of mechatronics. So for 2 years, I was just studying mechanical. And at some moment, I was like, oh, I need something else. And then I joined mechatronics. And in the mechatronics, I was able to automate these mechanical things using the sensors and the programs. And this was really interesting. For me, my personal suggestion is if you start learning programming, you find this thing really interesting because you are controlling something with your logics. And when you control something, you know how it will work. And because you program it, that's the best way, that's the best feeling you get when you program something. So after two years of my mechanical studies, I did 2 years in my electronics, so that's why it becomes mechatronics. And then I completely changed my career into automation line. I did my bachelor's in instrumentation, also non-mechanical, and then I did my master's in mechatronics. So I would say my end career, and today I am a development engineer, and most of my tasks includes programming the PLCs or HMI or working on IoT and giving some trainings. And I really love it. I'm really happy that I choose mechatronics because This is, although mechanical has its own advantages if you're really encoded to mechanical, but being a mechatronic engineer, it's way more fun to me personally compared to just being in mechanical. So if you want some fun in your life, if you want to control the robots, program the robots, go for programming. It's the best way, best feeling you will get in your career. So these were the top 10 PLC queries. I hope I answered your query. And I'm sorry if your query was not entertained in this video. Please put a comment below this video. So in the next video, I will use these comments and try to answer your queries. All right. And if you're not subscribed to this channel, I would highly recommend you to subscribe it, because most of the videos which are coming now would be related to Industry 4.0. So you will not be disappointed in the subscription. So thanks you for watching, and I wish you best learning, and I'll see you in the next video.